This is Cujo here. It's the story about the rabid dog. The woman and her child are trapped in a small car that won't start, and the dog has rabies and wants to eat them up. It's a very simple story, and it's fairly effective. The dog becomes the boogeyman, and the good mother is trying to protect her child. It's one of my favorite stories. It's very simple and very brutal.
Can I say that in your books that you're interested especially in people with special gifts? For instance, in The Shining, there's that young Danny, the teacher's son, who has the gift of the ability of shining. What is it?
It's a precognitive gift. It's the ability to see into the future under special circumstances. And I don't hold out any brief for belief in these things. I don't think necessarily that people do shine. All I know is that there are a lot of people who believe that such a talent may exist. And so it's fun to play with the idea of what would happen if a little boy, because children are powerless, you know, what if a little boy could see into the future?
But I mean, is it scientifical?
No, it's not scientific at all.
It's never proved.
No, it's never been proved. We know from the studies in parapsychology done by the J.B. Rhine Institute, there are apparently people, particularly twins, particularly identical twins, who seem to share some telepathic ability with what they call the Rhine cards, the ESP cards. We know that, for instance, in Firestarter, which is about a little girl with the ability to start fires at will, we know that there does seem to be a thing where human beings sometimes spontaneously combust. It's on the record. But what we know most of all is that we still live in a world of mystery and wonder, where all sorts of things happen which go unexplained every day. We live in a technological society, for God's sakes, where most of us employ such things as television, electric lights, microwave ovens. We don't have the slightest idea how any of those things work. That in itself is a kind of magic. I simply take it in a different direction and suggest a kind of human magic inside all of us.
What about Carrie? I mean, she has a special gift as well.
It's psychokinesis. It's another one of these talents that the Rhine people have investigated. The ability to move objects by the force of the mind, to shatter a mirror or to move knives, say, from a drawer or something like that. What interests me is that we're interested in these phenomena. And it's fun to play with the idea of, well, if you take a girl like Carrie, who's hated by her classmates, who's persecuted by her mother, and if she has a talent like this that's suppressed, what happens when that talent comes out? One of the reasons so many of my books have been made into film is because they're quite visual. Hollywood filmmakers want stories, but they want something more than story. They realize that what they're selling is picture, and what they're selling is spectacle, and in a larger sense that what they're selling is wonder. We go and we sit in the dark, and we want to see something that's going to amaze us and change us in some way. You know, so that's what Carrie does.
This is you?
This is me. C'est moi! Yeah, that's me. George Romero directed the movie, and we sat down and we talked about it, and I did a screenplay for Creepshow in about a week, I think. We knew what we wanted, which was a kind of a feel for the old horror comics from the 50s.
But whose idea was it to play the role?
It was George's. It was George's idea. One of the stories was about this farmer from way back in the country who discovers a meteor which is full of a kind of super growth food that turns him into a human weed. And the guy was a real hick. And I'd played a hick once before in an earlier Romero film called Night Riders. And George said, "Would you like to play this?" And I said, "Yes." And if you ask me why I said I'd like to try this, it's because it seemed like it would be fun. It seemed like it would be interesting. And you realize at the same time that you're going to become a target. You do one thing, which is to write, and then to jump over and to be in a feature film, you're asking for critical problems. And even that became part of the attraction. You know, the idea to just let it go all the way, and believe me, George let me go all out.
You directed the movie as well.
Yes. This movie, Maximum Overdrive.
Was that easy? Was it difficult? Because I think you never did it before.
It was very difficult. I made a lot of mistakes, all of which were forgivable except for one, and that was that I went against the way that I've worked all my life. I'm a very intuitive writer, and I tend to create on the spur of the moment. That is to say, when I sit down at the typewriter, I'm never entirely sure what's going to come out. And I'd read a book about how Alfred Hitchcock worked, and it said that he arranged everything in advance. He knew what every shot was going to look like, what every shot was going to be, with the result that for him, pre-production was the most exciting time of a film, and everything that happened during shooting was sort of a bore. And I was scared, and the idea of having a boring shooting schedule sounded wonderful to me. So I went in with every shot mapped out. There were places in the film where I allowed for spur-of-the-moment creativity to creep in, but they were the exceptions, and they're the best parts of the film. The rest of it's got sort of a stiffish, set-up feel. You know, when I went in, I didn't know what cutaways were. I didn't know what wild sound was. I didn't know what pickup shots were. None of these things. They're things that I learned sort of on the run.
Can I say this movie, Maximum Overdrive, is about trucks and cars rising against human race?
Yeah, and it's about 87 minutes long. I love machines.
Can I say that Carrie is the victim of the religious fundamentalism of her mother as well?
Yeah, you can.
Also in Children of the Corn, you have the danger of religious fundamentalism in an extreme form.
Yes, and that one is a more, that's a more clear-cut example of the way that I feel about religion. And my idea is that all organized religion leads sooner or later to the mass grave. If somebody offers you a Bible for your right hand, sooner or later they will offer to put a gun in your left.
I mean, in Children of Corn, it's about children.
Yes.
Who like to destroy adults if they could.
My wife is a lapsed Catholic, and she's fond of quoting something that she heard as a little girl who went to school in parochial schools and got to church every day. And apparently the Catholic Church's attitude toward children is, give us your children and they'll be ours forever. And when children are raised in this sort of strict, fundamental atmosphere, and I was, it sets into your mind and becomes a part of your psyche ever after. And part of the sin, as far as I'm concerned, is taking the plastic minds of small children and molding them. And in Children of the Corn, what I tried to present was an extreme case, the result of religious mania.
But aren't you afraid that you are, with your movies and your books, inspiring adults to use violence?
No, I don't think so. My belief is that films and books make an easy whipping boy for society. It's easy to point the finger and say, well, you see why this violence is going on in Northern Ireland. You see why these race riots are going on in Watts. The most recent example here in America was a film called Colors, where a lot of people said, if you show this movie, the gang violence is going to be incredible. Well, the problem with gang violence in America doesn't have anything to do with the movies. It has everything to do with hard drugs, rock cocaine in specific. If you are looking for an excuse to ignore the real problem and treat a symptom, you can treat the movies or the books. It's like killing the messenger because he brings you a message you don't like. I can't take responsibility for the lunatics of the world, and I won't take responsibility for the lunatics of the world, and I won't allow myself to be blamed for aberrant behavior by people who are mentally unstable. With The Shining, which is a story about a man who gives in to his psychotic impulses, tries to kill his wife and his child, are we to say, We can't show this. We can't tell stories like this because somebody might do something like that, when we know it reflects the world as it is.
But I mean, while sitting in front of your typewriter, now you're thinking about the moral task you have as an author in society?
No, question of morals never enters the writing of my fiction. Once I sit down in front of the typewriter, I become an amoral being. Later, when I'm done, there have been times when I have changed things only. For instance, in one of the novels, there was a description of a man who built a time bomb and blew some people up. I researched the subject and found out how you build a time bomb. But I took most of that out because my job was to write a story, not to leave an instruction manual for somebody who might actually want to build one. And that's a different area. There I sense a responsibility. But I think that my responsibility as an artist is only to tell the truth. And if that truth involves violent behavior as a result of a situation, then I must tell that truth. Otherwise, I begin to lie, and that's when I become an immoral being.